In this video, we're going to discuss the rules for significant figures, also known as sig figs. So people have different ways of teaching how to count sig figs. In this video, I'm going to sum it up in 6 simple rules. The first rule is that non-zero figures always count. So if you look at this number, 23,721, this number has 5 sig figs because none of those digits are 0. The second rule is that exact numbers never count. So this applies to when you are using conversion factors to convert from inches to centimeters, or you're using pi to find the area of a circle. Those numbers will never influence your sig figs. If you are confused, don't worry, because it will be much clearer when we start solving problems using dimensional analysis. The third rule is that zeros between non-zeros, also known as captive zeros, always count. So if we're looking at a number like 46,209, we're going to have 5 sig figs because the 0 in this example will count as a sig fig since it is between two digits that are non-zero. The fourth rule is that leading zeros never count. So if we look at a number like 0.023, the first two zeros do not count. So we have 2 sig figs. The fifth rule states that trailing zeros with a decimal point will always count. So if we look at a number like 789 with 4 zeros following the decimal point, all those zeros will count. So this number will have 7 sig figs. The presence of a decimal point is very important because our last rule states that trailing zeros without a decimal point are ambiguous. This means if you have a number like 2,500, we do not know whether those last two zeros are significant. So we can only say that this number has 2 sig figs. If you're still confused about the sixth rule, let's say you were given a number like 200,000. By just looking at this number, we can only say for certain that the 2 is a significant figure. However, we are not certain whether we should count the trailing zeros or not. So this number will only have 1 sig fig. Additional information would be something along the lines as rewrite this number using X number of sig figs. And to do this, you would use scientific notation. For this example, it asks us to rewrite it using 3 sig figs. And what we would do is we would write 2.00 times 10 to the fifth. The next problem, it asks us to write it using 4 sig figs. So we would write 2.000 times 10 to the fifth. If you're unfamiliar with scientific notation, I would gladly put out another video explaining this concept. Also note that whenever we have 10 to the power of some number, we will not count that as our significant figures. Now let's get into some examples. So here are some example problems, but I want you to try to solve these by yourself. So pause the video and then resume it once you solve all these problems. Okay, I'm going to assume that you paused the video and solved some of these problems. So let's look at the first one. So it asks us to find the number of sig figs in 25,000. Well, this falls under our rules 1 and 6. So this number has 2 sig figs. Next number is 2.32101. This falls under our first and third rule. So this will have 6 sig figs. The next number is 90,121. This falls under our first and third rule, and this will have 5 sig figs. The next number is 0.002302. This falls under our first, third, and fourth rule, so this number has 4 sig figs. The next number is 0.21012. This also falls under our first, third, and fourth rule, so this number will have 5 sig figs. The next number is 452 The next number is 45,210.12. This falls under our first and third rule, so this number will have 7 sig figs. The next number is 0.0000102. This falls under our first, third, and fourth rule, so this number has 4 sig figs. 3 sig figs. And our last number is 201.001. And this falls under our first and third rule, so this will have 6 sig figs. The next problem asks us how many sig figs are in 45,000 and to rewrite 45,000 using 3 sig figs. Well, 45,000 falls under our first and sixth rule, so that number has 2 sig figs. And to rewrite 45,000 only using 3 sig figs, we have to use scientific notation, and that will give us 4.50 times 10 to the 4th. Thank you for watching this video, and hope to see you next time.